All right, what's going on, everybody? It's Josh McCabe here, host of Overflow Beyond the Music, the podcast. Thanks so much for joining in to this sort of segue episode from Season 3 to Season 4, and so glad to have you with us. It's definitely been an interesting week for myself and for a lot of us who are in this music industry amidst this coronavirus outbreak or pandemic or whatever we want to call it. To be honest, I'm not a medical person. I'm not fully up on it. I'm just kind of, adhering to what I'm being asked to do and sort of adhering to the curveballs being thrown at a lot of us. And I don't understand fully. And even probably at the moment, I didn't fully understand, but I'm starting to understand a little bit more about just how large this thing is and some of the needs to really help slow down the process and the growth of it. So here I am sitting at home, quote unquote. Well, I wouldn't say I'm quarantined, but everything's kind of canceled for the next 6 to 8 weeks as you're hearing this. And I just actually got back. I was going out on a tour with an artist named Dan Bremnes, who we've had on this podcast before. And we went out of town for, I think, what was supposed to be about 14 dates, and I think we did 2, and then came back because everything else canceled. So now we're kind of not really sure what to do with our time and our week. And to be honest with you, it's particularly hard for myself and artists like Dan, who when we tour and travel and we go visit and we go minister and sing our music and play at churches and do events, that's our main source of income. That's where we get money for a house or car payments or food on the table. And so when all of a sudden that's just canceled, it definitely throws some curveballs for a lot of us. So I'm gonna ask, would you guys just keep us in prayer, keep us in your thoughts? And right now is better time. There's no better time than right now to hop online and buy merch off some of your favorite artist stores. I'll post the store that I have right now for my band Caves, that we'll be releasing some new music and some new merch soon as well. Just go support artists and find ways you can help them through this time. We don't live off salaries, so when we are not touring and traveling, we are not making money, and that causes issues for bills and all sorts of stuff. It's not a sob story. It's not meant to be that way. I don't care whether you're an artist that plays to 50 people a night or 5 or 10,000 people a night. You build your life on budgets, and when the income source for the budget is gone, it takes a little bit of time to compensate for that. So yeah, just keep us in prayer. And of course, I'm going to be keeping everybody else in prayer, and let me know how you are coping with this. If you can send us a message on Instagram, just at OverflowBTM. You can find us on Facebook at OverflowBTM, Twitter as well. You can message us and send us a quick note and just let me know what's going on. Would love to know how I can pray for you and keep you in my prayers, and we will go from there.
Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips.
Yeah, well, this episode's a bit of a unique one, and it's kind of why we're smudging it in between Season 3 and Season 4. I don't want to call it a special. I didn't really know what to call it, and it was recorded back in September or October of 2019 with Kalley of Bethel Music, and it was around the release of her new album. We'll talk a lot about that on this episode, but as we were gearing up to release it, I think we're going to be releasing it in late December. We got news that her 2-year-old daughter, Olive, had passed away. And she passed away on December the 14th. Her and her husband, Kalley and her husband, were away and came back to find out that their 2-year-old had passed away. And what followed after that, it made a lot of news, made a lot of headlines. A lot of people were talking about it. It made for a lot of conversation. But they began believing and praying and gathering that Olive would be resurrected and raised from the dead, and that this would not be a final thing, that this would not be Olive's last moments on this side of heaven, but that they believed, and I'm convicted to believe the same, that people sometimes die before their time, and they wanted to petition the Lord that he would bring her back. And it definitely caused a stir in a lot of circles, and I don't care what side of theology you're on this. I understand. I have two children of my own, and I cannot imagine how I'd be feeling in that circumstance. And to be honest, I would believe for a miracle as well. I have prayed for miracles. I have been in the hospital, and when my wife and I were pregnant with our second child, there was some complications early on, and I prayed like I never prayed before for miracles, and I believe God is a miracle working God. I believe He's doing miracles today. I've seen them with my own eyes. I am convicted to believe that the Lord wants to work miracles today, just like we saw in the Bible, and I will not step back from that. So in the midst of this pain, Kalley and her husband and many leaders from their church gathered on their own accord and believed and worshiped and wanted to see her raised from the dead. And there were a lot of misconceptions that came with that. A lot of people were wondering if they were doing some weird ritual around this child who was now deceased, and that's not the case. And so I think for me, I found it very curious, because it's a time when you have to put what you believe in your heart and what you're convicted to believe about Scripture, and it comes to life. It comes to real life. It comes up on your door. It comes into your everyday. It comes into people you do life with in your community with, and you have to say, do I really believe the things that I say I believe? Because if I believe them, I would be believing for this thing to happen. And so what ended up happening is Kalley and her husband Andrew posted this on Instagram, and it says this. It says, "We are asking for prayer. We believe in a Jesus who died and conclusively defeated every grave, holding the keys to resurrection power. We need it for our little Olive Elaine, who stopped breathing yesterday and has been pronounced dead by the doctors. We are asking for bold, unified prayers from the global church to stand with us in belief that He will raise this little girl back to life. Her time here is not done, and it is our time to believe boldly and with confidence what King Jesus paid for. It is time for her to come to life." And as a believer, I read that and go, I can't argue. I can't argue with the belief that Jesus would want to do a miracle. And so this began reaching far and wide. And I thought their pastor at the church, Bill Johnson, really had a great response in how he addressed why they were believing for resurrection together. He says, "Resurrection is at the heart of Jesus' behavior, but it is also in His command to those who follow Him." And he's referencing Matthew chapter 10, verse 8, where Jesus sends out the 12 apostles and tells them, "Go heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, and freely you give." And I have to back this up, because that's the command He gives to the disciples in Matthew 10. But then in Matthew 28, in the Great Commission, He says, in verse 19, it says, "Teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you." Everything I've commanded you. What did He command the disciples to do? Go out, heal the sick, raise the dead, and cleanse those, and drive out demons. That's exactly what Jesus was commissioning the disciples to do in Matthew 10, and it's what He commissioned the disciples to do in verse 19 of Matthew 28, and it's what we're commissioned to do as believers, for those who have faith in Jesus and profess that Jesus Christ raised from the dead. That is His command for us. And, for me, I go, I've never seen anyone raised from the dead. So that begins to affect my worldview. But I love how Bill Johnson responds to it. He says, "Just because it is not common does not mean it's not normal. Just because resurrection from the dead is not common does not mean it's not normal." And I think it's just so well said, because there are a lot of things that we don't physically see happen, but does not mean that it's not in Jesus' heart or Jesus's wheelhouse of ability to do miracles on this earth. I can tell you a million miracles I've seen God do in my life financially. I can tell you of somebody I've seen miraculously healed of cancer. And, I'm not here on this podcast, and I've never been here on this podcast to spark theological debate. That's not what this is about. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm telling you what I believe. We can disagree on that. As believers, I believe as long as we can make sure that we are in fact sure Jesus Christ was raised from the dead, and that He was the Son of God, I think we can agree to disagree on a lot of different things. But I wanted to give some context for why I decided to still air this interview, and why I felt like now was a time I kind of wanted to give some thoughts on it, because at the time, I'm not here to have a salacious podcast where I'm going to give you my hot take on what's happening in the world while others are grieving the loss of a child. And many of you do know that the child was not raised. It did not happen. I don't understand why miracles happen sometimes and why sometimes they don't. But that's a question I'm going to ask the Lord when I see him face to face one day. But what I think is really important is how we respond. And what was so interesting as I was editing this podcast, even not sure if I'd still release it, I see Kalley talk about in this podcast how she and her church respond to adversity and respond to things that they don't understand happening and stand in belief that God is still good all the time. And she talks about it, and it's a little scary that just a few months before she would have to put those things into practice, she preached it. And I saw her practicing in that season what she preached on this podcast. So let's head into my interview with Kalley of Bethel Music.
You are my ecosystem. You are the air I'm breathing. In the endless way.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. And my guest today, I'm really excited to have her on because I just love the way she leads worship. I love her songs. I love her music, and I love her church. And I've got Kalley on the line with me right now. How are you doing, Kalley?
I am doing well. How about you?
I'm doing good. And I've got to tell you, I wouldn't say frustrated. Frustrated's the wrong word. But Kalley Halligenthal. Did I get that right?
Halligenthal.
Halligenthal. Oh, I've been practicing all day.
No, the thing is, I've been practicing for 10 years, and I'm like maybe getting close myself, so no pressure.
Well, I mean, the thing is that I did some practice on it, and now you're just Kalley. So there we go.
I know. Well, thanks for putting the time in. I thought maybe it would just be easier for everybody if we just tried. And the first name's kind of weird, too. I'm not making it easy for anybody, you know?
No, it's totally fine. I mean, we appreciate all names, I guess. I don't know where I'm going with that. But I mean, on that note, have you had some moments where you've been leading worship at a conference and people are just like, we're so blessed to have Kalley, like where there's kind of mumble through the last name?
Oh yeah, I've heard it all. I've heard it. There was once I got called up at an airport gate. And they're like, Kalley held gentle. Like,
yes.
Well, so close. I've heard them all. And if anyone attempts, that for me is just like, that deserves a round of applause and a quick response from me. So, yeah, I'm
so good.
Very flexible on it.
Well, I mean, it's funny because I mean, my last name's McCabe and I get McCabby. And I'm like, really? How is it? How are you getting McCabby out of that?
You can butcher any name. That's what I think.
I know. Speaking of last names, you probably would know my sister, Stephanie McCabe.
No way.
That is my sister.
She is wonderful. Yeah, okay.
That's my flesh and blood. So
no way. She's the best. She is extraordinary.
Yeah, we got to see her a couple weeks ago when you guys were in Nashville at the Opry.
Yes.
And so we got to have a quick little visit, and now we're from Canada, and now 2 or 3 of us live in the States, so it's a little complicated.
So special. Yeah. Wow. Well, nothing like an event to bring people together, you know.
Absolutely. We had a good time at that night.
Amazing.
Yes. I mean, I wanted to know, just you kind of get to hop in and out of some of these Bethel music tours and these nights, and what I noticed when I was there was that it was not like anything else I've experienced in this quote unquote CCM or Christian music or whatever world whatever title you want to put on it. There was something really special about the night, and just tell me a little bit about the heart of these tours.
Yeah, I think the idea is, we definitely have a value for touring and exporting, and a lot of means what's happening in our church, at our church home. This last tour was our Victory tour based off of the Victory album. And so there was a heavy emphasis on, seeing breakthrough and knowing that he is the God of breakthrough. And when he comes with signs, wonders, miracles, and just watching him encounter people with power these nights. It was really special. So, and I think the idea too behind travel, what's always moving to me when I get to jump on is the awareness of, as we drive overnight, show up in a new city, and for me, it's always the recognition we are not starting anything in these new cities. There are rich wells. There's investment in prayers, in all these efforts, but more than anything, these places, God has a heart and a vision for what these cities are and what He calls them and what they're meant to be, and we just get to be partakers of that. We get just we can come in and enjoy and press in on those things, but we're not starting anything. We're not creating anything. We come alongside what God has already begun and how He's already moving there, and that's just the biggest honor. It's the biggest honor to be a part of.
Well, it was great too because you got to share your new song, and I just thought it was great that you got a chance to share that and share the heart of it. And one of the things that I really intrigued me about you was I heard you on Seth Mosley's podcast probably about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about songwriting and just some of the feedback you were receiving as you were part of writing Spirit Move. And I wonder if you can maybe talk about some of that journey writing then, and then what writing for Faultlines Volume 1 and 2 looked like for you, and sort of the growth pattern or the growth journey that you've been on. Yeah,
it's interesting. Songwriting is one of those topics. I think a lot of people are maybe born with like, I'm gonna write songs.
Yeah.
And they kind of they start out really early and just have songs kind of brimming, is my impression. I don't feel like I've necessarily been one of those. It's been more of a graceful at times not kicking and screaming along the way of like, just I primarily feeling the Lord ask me to do it, and then being surrounded by incredible people who do so well at it, and then just, staying in the game and not letting insecurity at times or, any number of things that come up when we try new things, not let those take over. And so for me, along the way, it has been really interesting to learn to write alongside heroes at this scale. It's an amazing honor, and it's really been a journey for me. I think largely before Faultlines, I was in the world of writing for, corporate worship music, which is such an honor, like to give language and melody to the church, to the world, to sing to God, to sing about God. Like, that is such an incredible honor.
Of course, yeah.
It also is a very nuanced way of writing, where your average person could sing the melodies, and the concepts are fresh, but they're not too complex. They're vertical and they're inspiring of worship. They're personal, but not too personal. There's so many things to consider as you write corporately, and I think I have definitely started to settle more into like, oh, this is my unique voice in that world. Faultlines for me was really a different kind of stretching, because it wasn't primarily corporate worship music. I felt melodically like I could explore some things that I maybe wouldn't. Just if you're thinking about leading a large congregation of people, the content of it could be much more personal, and kind of needed to be.
I was going to say, did it feel a little less, maybe a little pressure off? Because, writing songs for your church, for you, for Sunday morning is one thing, and then writing songs that are going to carry beyond your walls across the world. Like, did it feel like when you were writing for this record, you got to just kind of let go of everything, just be yourself a bit more?
Yeah, I definitely felt it was amazing. Bethel Music, I remember some of them coming in and listening to what I had so far and just being like, hey, just push it artistically. Just find creatively what you want to say. And that to me was such amazing license of like, well, really think outside of the box, like really go for it. And I think I just hadn't really written that way. I kind of have only done the corporate worship approach. And so for me, it was like really fun to be able, and freeing to be able to explore like a lot of these songs, I opened up my journal and paged through the last year,
right,
and wrote song. I find in front of me, so now about all these Faultlines, are they yours or are they mine?
Wow.
And like, well, that's a concept I wouldn't necessarily tackle for like a corporate worship song, but I can write about that. You know what I'm saying? And so it really was freeing. And it felt like, rather than creating new things inside of me, it almost just gave allowance to the things that have been there that I didn't know were there. And that was a really beautiful, pretty healing process for me.
So I noticed, as always, one of the things I love to do is just look through album credits and see what's on there. Did you do some work with Jeff Schneeweiss on this album?
I did. Yep. So Jeff produced Volume 1.
Yeah.
And he and I worked on Oasis a bit together in terms of writing, but he's a genius. He's amazing.
He is. And for listeners who don't know, Jeff had a band called Number One Gun, which was like one of my favorite bands. I was like an emo kid growing up. And we had Paul and Hannah on the podcast, and we got into a big, kind of emo playlist throwback. It was good times. But
yeah, they're your guys for that.
That's amazing. They were so fun. But Jeff is so good at bringing new sounds out of people, don't you think?
Yes. It was like shocking to hear what he comes up with. I mean, he is unlike anyone I've ever met. He's amazing.
And so you went from working with Jeff on the first volume to Jason Ingram on the second volume, which Jason is known for doing a lot of a lot of different things, but definitely you'd see his name more around corporate worship, more around sort of kind of that sound. What was the contrast like as far as, coming out with your first solo project and your voice kind of stepping out in its own style? What were the contrasts like there?
Yeah, it was really amazing to watch. I mean, I have so much regard, so much respect. Like, both of them, I get like, I'm like, how in the world am I working with both of you? Yeah. And both very different takes and perspectives, very true to who they are. And I think that was so inspiring in and of itself. They sound like they are, and obviously have so much have so much breadth to what they create. But it was so sweet to see these songs in the hands of different people. So yeah, Jason, I mean, I just can't say enough. He did a lot of co-writing with me too on the project, and watching the expertise. He's just a craftsman. I mean, his experience and the safety he creates in songwriting. Some of the really, really pretty vulnerable moments that I was bringing to the table, things that I was writing, to watch how carefully he put these melodies to them that are so lulling. They're so cinematic and beautiful. And it felt like the treatment those songs needed. And to watch Jeff come with this kind of wildness to him, it was so beautiful on the songs that he took and ran with. And so for me, it really is like we hit these circumstances in our life where it's not one note, it's not one experience, it's not one emotion. It really is kind of a variety of things we're feeling all at once, especially when they're situations like this album was birthed out of, that was largely kind of like things out of my control happening, and finding the Lord in them, and finding myself and resolve and comfort and peace in the midst of pain and angst and questions. It really it demanded comfort, just like it demanded elation. It demanded, it's like it's two sides of the same coin, and it was so special to have two outstanding genius producers take their side and make it so beautiful and so unique. I just am in awe of both of them.
Well, I mean, the album is beautiful, and I put it on today when my wife and I were heading downtown Nashville with our kids, just to go do some sightseeing with her parents are in town, and I put it on the car for her, and I said, hey, I got Kalley coming on the podcast today. And my wife was like, oh, I love Kalley, and then I said, oh, this is her new song, and she goes, this. what? And we're listening to Oasis. She's like, this is not what I expected.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe for people who don't have a window into your whole life, maybe we didn't expect it, but are there sounds and feelings in there and vibes in there that sort of resonate with what you listen to and what you like and what historically has resonated musically in your heart?
Yeah, it was interesting coming into this album and finding references, things that move me, because it really is it's kind of all over the place. The things that I enjoy listening to.
But that's okay. That's good.
Yeah, largely it's like, and I think I just couldn't, narrowing it down, even that, I'm like, to me it feels like, what is the song asking for, you know? And so I definitely like more of the experimental end of things. I'm really moved by that. I think if you can have an inspiring concept and find a way to frame it musically, like I'm so moved by that. And so, and even on a leading worship level, there are times where I'll settle really deep into something and then almost instantaneously I'm ready to flip and just like explode, right. And I think it kind of captures some of those different levels that I think in people who know me more personally, personality wise, it feels like both feel very true and feel important to the expression of who I am. So I know, I don't think it's ever been done. They were telling me at the label, I don't think it's ever been done that there's been, 2 EPs released on the same day with different sounds.
Yeah.
But I feel like it captures the storyline in a way that, is compelling to me. Yes, sonically, but also just like storyline wise. I hear lyric probably before I hear sound. I'm drawn to the story. That's just always kind of how I think. And so even just storyline wise, I love the angle that it took,
Yeah, I want to ask you too, it's kind of a deep question, but we go deep on this podcast.
I love it.
What's something that God's been teaching you in this journey of, just having the opportunity in front of you with Bethel Music, but being part of the church and the ministry, and then stepping into this, like, what is something that life has taught you in the past year that you can say, I didn't think that, feel that, know that, or hadn't discovered that a year ago? Yeah,
it's a great question. These albums are definitely written out of a lot of discovery. A lot of times, I think sometimes when we walk away with the most in our life is out of things that maybe when you're in it, you're like, man, I would love to have a break from this process, or this is tough to walk through. And I think the last year has been that. The story of this album is not kind of bright and shiny. It's largely out of the fires coming through Redding, where we live about a year and a half ago.
Were you guys personally affected by that? Because I know, just talking to my sister, there were several people from the team that had to evacuate.
Yeah, we were evacuated for a month. We had 65 homes in our neighborhood that are gone, in the process of being rebuilt now. So it did. The fire came in and landed across a river, over by where we are, and then obviously it's just spread very rapidly. So it really did. It kind of catalyzed a lot of questions and processes in my life where I had kind of glossed over them. I was uncomfortable with ashes in my own life, and I would rather just kind of rush into the resolve and to fix it and be better. But there was no rushing out of this. It was, it was
out of your control.
Definitely a process. Yeah, out of your control. And it really did elicit a lot of other times in my life where, like, man, I don't think I probably even really looked at that very thoroughly. I didn't bring that to the Lord. I didn't maybe even think he wanted to see the mess. I think I didn't want to look at it, and I assumed he didn't want to look at it. And I really found Jesus leading me, almost shepherding me through the valley, and like me recognizing he's not scared of this. I don't know why I'm scared of looking at this stuff. I find him moving in closer to me where I think he's going to move further away. I find him not afraid of my questions. I find him unashamed of the doubts that I can feel ashamed about. And I find his presence is the answer I was looking for. And that he's not in a rush to move past, but he will bring beauty out of it. Some of the beauty is being willing to find him in it and not rushing past, and so it really, I think the last year, that is a big lesson that I've learned is Jesus, I project onto him all the sorts of stuff that I can feel about, like, oh, if it's messy, if it's dirty, then it's bad and I should just move past it.
Yeah.
And, he doesn't actually feel that way. He's Emmanuel, God with us. In the midst of all of it, unashamed, there as a first responder, ready when all there is rubble to meet us, to find us there. So that was very, very shaping for me in my relationship with the Lord, in how I view things that are outside of my control, finding him as comforter, finding him as Emmanuel and friend. When I wasn't at my best, when I was kind of confronted by panic and fear and survivor's guilt and all that kind of stuff, I found Jesus there with me.
Yeah, I mean, it's so powerful too. How I look at just your community too, and some of the things that you guys have gone through. Joel Taylor with the health, and then
Jackson, yep.
And then was it a couple years ago that Pastor Bill was dealing with some stuff, or and it just seems like not seems like there's always trials, but it definitely feels like you guys as a community have learned how to turn to the Lord, and also how to build some beauty out of the ashes, and some testimonies that will carry around the world of the perseverance, both of yourself and of your church, because I know how important church family is to you.
Yes. Yeah. There's a message that Pastor Bill has given that I know has shaped so many of us. He talks about how, and it's going to be a really butchered paraphrase because he's so eloquent.
It's like me when I'm trying to quote scripture. I had one guy on the podcast who was quoting scripture and then quoted it completely wrong. I'm like, oh, amen. And it was
totally
wrong.
No, yeah. So I'm gonna do that right now to Pastor Bill Johnson. But he talks about how when we're confronted with these questions, when life takes an unexpected turn, when there's pain, when there's grief, our staying close, our bringing ourselves to Jesus, our choosing to worship through it, brings a fragrant offering that we can only ever give in this time. It's not one that we'll give when we're with him in his presence in heaven, because there's no faith needed then. We'll see plainly, we'll see clearly. Now we have the gift of faith, the gift of choosing to stay close, the gift of our worship when we don't understand, but the trusting who he is, the learning to live unoffended, and to stay close, that is an offering that we can give him unique to this time that we'll never be able to give in another moment. And it's been so inspiring for our community. It dignifies the moment, and it turns it from only grief to grief that becomes a worthy offering before the Lord. And the number of times I've heard that quoted, again, I'm misquoting it, but the concept is there. It's a bedrock for how we view the world, and it just feels like a revelation from him that shaped how we perceive things. I'm so grateful to be in a community where there's that kind of insight, that kind of perspective when things are going great and when they're not, that is a worthy, fragrant offering before Jesus.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's so good. And I mean, I was just reading the lyrics before we came on. I jotted it down, and we talked a little bit about the fires, but I love the lyrics of in the middle of it where it says, "Where are you when the wildfire is taking ground?" And being able to go and realize that God is strong enough to handle our questions and our doubt and our frustration. In fact, actually, I feel like when we go to him, even say like, "Where are you in this? Where are you in this?" That's actually I feel like it's actually a form of worship to realize he's the only one worthy of our petition and the only one who can provide understanding to what's going on,
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, hey, we're so grateful for this record, Faultlines Volume 1 and 2. We played Oasis coming into this conversation, and coming out of it, I would love to play your song, your favorite song. Give me, I know it's hard to choose one, but I'm saying, like, just give me one and tell me why it's something you feel like people need to hear.
You know, I can't choose a favorite, but I did have one come to mind right away, so I'm just going to honor the first thought.
Yeah.
I am going to choose Targeted.
Okay.
It was one, first of all, it's just so, what Jeff did is just so fun on it.
Yeah.
But it's the belief of, like, you know what, no matter what we face and however even aggressive it feels like life can get at times, we have a Father who's not passive. He is forward in his pursuit. He's forward in his goodness and his mercy. They are chasing us down faster than anything else could. We are protected, we're covered, and we're held by the most capable, most loving hands, and we can't escape that grasp. We are completely taken care of. So I think that's the message I want to leave people with.
All right, I'm into it. Well, hey, Kalley,
Awesome.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks, Josh.
I appreciate you coming on. And hey, make sure you give Kalley a follow on Instagram as well. Kalley, what's your Instagram handle? We'll have it in the show notes, but you tell us.
Yeah, I'm going to spell it because my name is hard, as we've discussed.
Yes.
Kalleyheili. Kalley Hiley.
Perfect. We will have the link. We'll have the link in the profile. Make sure you go follow her. And this is the song Targeted here on Overflow Beyond the Music.
Like a hurricane, you pointed at me, you're coming for me. I am targeted by your faithfulness, your goodness is chasing me down. I am targeted by your faithfulness.
Well, there you have it. There's my conversation with Kalley of Bethel Music. And again, when you hear that conversation in the context of everything she's been through in the last few months, it takes on a whole different life. It becomes really real, really quick. So I want to encourage you, make sure you go check out her album. Make sure you get a copy of it, pay for it, download it, support her ministry. Give her a follow on Instagram. We'll have that in the show notes below. But again, keep praying for all of your favorite artists who are affected by this outbreak. I mean, there's a lot of people affected. I can't imagine how families are feeling with elderly people in their family who have been diagnosed as having this virus. So we're going to be praying for them as well, praying that this thing slows down. And you know what? Actually, in spite of everything I've already said in this podcast, let's pray for a miracle. This virus would just be wiped out miraculously, and that we would see people getting to go back to living their best life. My name's Josh McCabe. This is Overflow Beyond the Music. Thanks so much for hanging out with us this week. We'll see you again.